I'm John Miglosh for the Wisconsin DMA and the International Society for Strategic Marketing. Okay, let's mosey on over to the news stories. And first off, I thought this was going to be a good article talking about how robots are doing contact-free delivery, but actually they're not. Sorry, they the Google Wing did 1,000 deliveries in 2 weeks. That must be like one drone limping back and forth. So that wasn't very interesting. A lot of. I have to sort through a lot of stuff to get anything interesting. Okay, 5 things to know about the Apple Google collaboration on the contact tracing. Okay, and this is the idea of it is you got this cute date or friend. I guess this is a girl because she's got the rings on, and or it could still be a date, and and all of a sudden your phone tells you that she's got the coronavirus. So you may want to push your chair back a little. Anyway, so Apple and Google are saying that they want to figure out a way keep to keep track of who tests positive. And in Singapore, they actually do have or did have an app that took this approach. They think that the digital approach could work really well. It's the idea of it is basically that um, your Bluetooth would connect up. So it isn't like over the internet. It isn't like your name or anything like that. And it doesn't mean you got the coronavirus, but it would mean that maybe you were close to somebody who did. Which brings us to some of the ways that countries have mitigated or dealt with the coronavirus. It seems like, according to the Wall Street Journal, Apple and Google want to bake in this idea of contact tracing, which you may or may not like, and there may or may not be a way to turn it off. But in Singapore, where they had contact tracing, only 3/4 of the population, it would take 3/4 of the country's population, whereas only about 1/6. There's about 6 million people, so you'd have to get up to about 450 million people, or 4.5 million people, for it to really work as intended. But they say it might have worked a little. I found a really interesting article on South Korea. And how they reined in the outbreak without shutting everything down. And the main idea was that they worked with, they identified the people who had it and were real careful with those people. So, as an example, I think I highlighted this, maybe I just read it. There was a Kentucky Fried Chicken. We'll just talk about it. There was a Kentucky Fried Chicken where somebody tested positive, and so basically they said this Kentucky Fried Chicken has a positive coronavirus. The people who ran that Kentucky Fried Chicken said, we're going to clean the thing top to bottom, and we're going to make sure that we don't open until we do. And we're going to be very, very careful with this employee to make sure that they get well cared for, but also get isolated completely, more than just stay at home. And so that's kind of more like the traditional approach with epidemics, is that you identify the people who have it, and then you make sure they are kept away from everyone else, rather than this lock everybody down. And so that said, I wanted to just take a quick look at some of the daily cases and what's been going on since this started. Okay, and so let's turn this on. Here's the daily cases up through Sunday, and as you can see, I would say there's a trend going generally flat, or perhaps down a little. If we consider this to be an anomaly and this to be the peak, then we do see a downward trend. Okay, and you say, well, that's not a trend. Okay, well, this was a trend, but it's only 3 or 4 weeks. And this is a trend too, and it's a little more than a week. Now here's Italy. And Italy is definitely a trend because this is the peak, March 27th, and that's about 2 weeks ago. So we see a clear downward trend in Italy. Spain, similar. Daily deaths, downward trend. Austria, some people think Austria is somewhat similar to the United States in culture and lifestyle and some of that stuff. And obviously from this peak, this is cases, a downward trend. If you look at deaths, it's not as clear, but these are only 20 or 30 per day, so you get a little more jumpiness. Brazil, also downward trend. Okay, now why do I bring up these countries? Well, Italy, Spain, we're in severe lockdown. United States, I consider fairly severe. Austria, South Korea, I think I got South Korea on here, yeah, South Korea. Daily deaths, definitely been horizontal for a long time, but it's very low numbers. See this? 5. Okay, very low numbers, and still a downward trend. If we look at number of cases, I think that gives you a better feel for it, right? See that? Number of cases just down and flat, okay? Not a lockdown. Okay, so what I want to talk about is, here is some of the projections. Estimated number of hospital beds needed in the U.S., okay? And the peak was something like 250,000. Keep in mind we have about 60,000, I believe, available. Okay, so that was a huge problem. And if we got to even this point, it was 120, 130,000. That was double the available beds. Okay, this was a revised estimate, and we should also keep in mind that all of these estimates were with mitigation. Some people say they weren't, but they were. All the 2 million possible deaths, the 200,000 possible deaths, and now we're at about 20,000 possible deaths, which is, or actual deaths. And there's some question on how the categorization was done. But we're off by 100 times that initial projection, and that was with mitigation. Okay, so first off, when you think about projection modeling, you know, I've been doing this for 25 years, and if I was off by 100-fold, I would be fired every time. I also have beaten companies from 3 continents, top worldwide projection modelers, predictive modelers, customer segmentation modelers, and as recently as the last few months, we've beaten client segmentation model by what did we say? 153% and 199%. And we're working on another one right now. So why does projection modeling work in some places and not others? Well, part of it is that you need a labeled data set, and you need a data set that's in the same realm of reason with what you're going through right now. If you don't have that, then you don't have much of anything. Okay? You have to have something that is, all data is historical, and you need historical comparability. Okay? It doesn't have to be identical, but it has to be in the realm of reason. And so when the coronavirus hit and we heard that hydrochloroquine might be effective, the news was full of stories that said, well, this isn't, how would we put it? This isn't tested. Hydrochloroquine isn't well tested. Well, it isn't tested at all on a new virus that just turned up. But neither is anything else, right? And there's 2 other drugs that are in clinical trials right now or something in New York. One is $7,000 per patient. The other is $1,000 per patient. But hydrochloroquine, which with the Z-Pak and zinc, is something like $20 a patient. So you can see why the drug companies wouldn't like that. And if you're getting funded by drug companies, you might want to say, oh, gee, this isn't well proven. Well, nothing was well proven, and neither were the projection models. So understand this about predictive modeling and projection modeling. If there is no historical precedent, then the fancy graph is just someone's opinion, some expert opinion, but an opinion nevertheless. And we will not know the difference until we get there. That's the way the future is. Sorry, can't help it. That's just the way it is. Okay? So right here, what we're seeing is the actual. Okay? And the actual is, you know, and this I think is cumulative. It's not actual right now. The fact is people aren't being hospitalized. The hospitals are not overwhelmed. Some people say, well, that's because the peak is still to come. Well, let's follow that up. Okay, so here's an article from Israel. And let's see if I can get this right. Could the Israel National News, I don't know if that's a reputable publication or not, but the person that they're referring to is Major General Professor Isaac Ben Israel. Okay, and he says we're already in the final stages of coronavirus epidemic. He's the chairman of the Israeli Space Agency, the National Council for Research and Development, and head of the Security Studies program at Tel Aviv University. He also has a PhD in philosophy. I never got my PhD, but I do have a master's in philosophy. So I like the guy right off the bat. Okay? What he said was that the rate of hospitalization was increasing at a rapid pace every day, but this reality has since changed radically. It's like this all over the world, both in countries where they have taken closure steps like Italy and in countries that have not had closures like Taiwan or Singapore. There's an increase until the 4th to 6th week, and immediately thereafter moderation until during the 8th week it disappears. Now, why? Well, a natural cycle with viruses is that they replicate but not perfectly. And because they don't have the mechanism to replicate, they require a cell to replicate them for them, because they're basically not alive. And so they go into a cell, inject the DNA themselves into the cell, and that gets replicated in the cell. But over time, they lose their effectiveness generally. They replicate worse and worse and worse, because basically mutations are generally less capable than their predecessor. Okay, so this is happening in countries that both have closed down, like us, Israel, and those that have not closed until today, like Sweden. Every country, no matter what its response. That's why I showed you so many of those charts. Okay, all across the world, you see the trend going down. And if you look at the overall world picture, that's what you see. What's causing the moderation is unclear. Therefore, I propose we end the closures immediately after the current week. Okay? We'll start increasing the workforce from 50% to 15% to 50%, and in 2 weeks we'll reach 100%. Okay, well, that's wonderful. That's wonderful news, and I've been saying this from the beginning that we have a lot of tools, and this can't go on forever because we know that the downside is tremendously problematic if we don't stop. So time to move on, time to look ahead, time to get your marketing back together. And if you don't have a good predictive modeler, give me a call. Like and share. Good news today. Have a great day. I'm John Miglautsch. Sorry I'm late. Bye-bye.